Hey folks, welcome to Bear Mountain. This week we are starting the 17th of April, I think, at this point. What week would that be? 16? 17?
I think it's week 17.
Anyway, what we're doing today is we have our tomatoes have germinated. We did these guys, I guess it would be approximately about 10 days ago now. And we actually got pretty good germination. We did 80 mini blocks here in this meat tray. And they're all up. They all have their pretty much their first cotyledon leaves pretty much open. Then we've got a few seed heads that kind of refuse to kind of burst off the tips of the plant, which isn't any big deal. But we got a nice selection, and it looks like we got about pretty close to about 60% germination. In some cases, we got 100%, like as an example, a Moscovich and Oregon Spring and Golden Cherry. They're all like 100%. And the Brandywines these are the standard classic Brandywines. That would probably be maybe our worst one because it looks like we only got, out of 10, we got maybe 60%. So roughly 6 out of 10 on that one. And we did pretty good on the Amish paste. Out of a good 20 on there, we got at least, it looks like about 15. So I think we're going to have enough to do our next step. We don't bump up from this stage into a 2-inch block, but you could, if you were using soil blocks, have the standard 2-inch block with the square dibble in it. And these guys would break off and they would fit perfectly into it. And that would be kind of the next stage of growing up. But what we're going to do for the next couple of weeks is we're going to transplant these guys into 6-packs. So then we can do a better evaluation of which ones are the best thriving. And we're going to be doing the fertilization at that point in here. And they'll stay in these 6-packs until they get up to the point where they're putting on probably heading towards their third set of true leaves, but probably, second for sure. We're talking about them getting up to the point where they're going to be, maybe 4 inches tall. And then at that point, we'll bump them up into the last set of pots. And what we usually do is we'll take the ones we think are the best and we'll use rose pots. Let me get you an example of what we're talking about. This would be your typical rose pot. For us, it's looks like about 6-inch deep, and it's about probably 3 inches on the top. And if you look at the bottom is an open weave. So these guys, we would then take these plugs and transplant into here to grow to the final size before we actually put them in the field itself. So that way they get a long, good period of time. Because we're not going to be able to put these guys in the ground until we get to pretty close to Memorial Day. And we're still having cold weather. We even had snow flurries this last week. So, for our zone 8B here in Western Oregon, that's a pretty unusual set of circumstances. But our soil temps are still down in the cool, probably about 50 degrees, maybe a little cooler than that. And nighttime, we're still getting frost. So we're at least a good month away from being able to get these guys outside. But
we always found, though, that by the 1st of April, we don't usually get that frost and stuff. And this year is very unusual. Technically, in Zone 8B, our last frost date is April 21st.
Yeah, well, it looks like we're trying to do that.
We're trying to get there, but
because we have frost again tonight. And so, yeah, it's probably going to start warming up this week and we'll be out of that danger of frost. But still, we have the issue of spring rains here in Western Oregon tend to be very cold water. And we'll get thunderstorms kind of come up in the afternoon, for lack of a better term. They're nowhere near the thunderstorms of what people get back east, but these are more like cloud bursts that happen once the sun's out long enough to warm things up. Warm air, cold air mixing, boom, we'll get cold water. So again, what we have to look at is when our soil temperature is consistently at least 50 degrees or better for these guys to grow effectively. And that for us is going to end up being like right around Memorial Day. So how do we transplant these? Well, we used, there it is, my handy dandy little fence rod dibbler. These are filled with our standard potting mix, which also has some worm castings in it. And I think we did one before on, what our mix was on this. So I'm not going to kind of go back through that, but we'll also, once we transplant these guys in, we'll water them in with some worm extract tea. And then from there, we'll start on a 7-day rotation of using Janam grass liquid fertilizer at a 1:100 dilution every 7 to 10 days or so. And so what we'll start with is, I guess we'll start with, let's see, we have a sauce here. This is Sunrise sauce, which was a determinant. And we ended up getting, wow, this one's 100% germination. So we have 10 of those guys. So that's pretty good.
But we've had other folks who've commented and said that's a good one.
Yeah. And these guys are really pretty small, in terms of the block itself. So I'm only going to kind of like make these dibbles big enough to basically where I can get it started, and then I'll use my finger to kind of finish it off. All right, I'm going to start here and just kind of show you. This is kind of a typical block. And really at this point, we only have a couple of roots showing through. So these guys are in good shape. And this is a beautiful little transplant. And we've dibbled it in. What I kind of do is I use my finger just to kind of, make the hole a little bit bigger. And then I want to take this 3/4 inch block and just kind of push it in and push the soil up around it. And that's going to be basically it. Doing a complete tray of probably all these guys, but we're going to try to get in as many of these guys as we can, because not all of them will end up being, super great quality. We hope that most of them do. So here's a classic example of little roots coming out. And we'll just make sure we get the roots in, get it pushed in. It's really no more difficult transplanting these guys than it is trying to put them in a 2-inch block either. So, from what we found,
the little block fits in the little block indentation.
It makes it a little faster, I guess.
It doesn't need to be pinched up around the stem. The soil on this way needs to kind of be pinched up around the stem.
Right.
But it takes longer to make the block.
Right. So what we got is one that's kind of a dud. It couldn't shed its seed coat over the cotyledon leaves. So we're going to count that as a no-go. And I've got one that's kind of discolored. I'm not sure exactly why. I'd probably still make it, but I'm saying, if I have a choice of taking something that is, a much better, stronger colored, I don't even think I'm going to use my dibble stick. I'll just use my finger. And I'd rather take those because I'm starting from something that I know is good. So I know I got 6 of these guys. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my stake and put it in here so they know that everything forward of this is my Sunrise sauce. And then we'll do the next variety, which is a cherry. It's called Washington. So is that where we're putting our scraps today?
Yep.
Okay, we also recycle these guys. It goes into the compost pile. Any weeds or anything like that might have gotten somehow in there. I don't know how that happened, but all this stuff goes into the compost pile.
I ended up growing a weed.
Sometimes, yeah, when you're using homemade compost, sometimes some things can slip in.
I grew that, and look how healthy it was.
Yeah, cherry tomatoes do put out really good roots too.
This is one we had before.
Yeah, and it was a kind of a pretty good size cherry tomato, as I remember.
It was really good, but the deer also liked it.
Yeah.
And they went after it with a vengeance. Deer fence, deer fence.
Yeah. Deer.
Bad.
They look better next to my mashed potatoes.
Just don't come in my garden.
Yeah, that's it. We'd like to live and let live, but there comes a point where you got to go.
Let feast off of, all the surrounding grass around here.
Right.
Leave us alone.
Well, deer are browsers. They're not really big grass eaters. I mean, they'll eat grass, but they'd rather eat the new growth off of plants and roses and all that kind of stuff.
Tomatoes.
So I ended up with one extra cherry. I'll maybe just set that aside and just go, I'll have a mixed tray. So that's basically it. We're just going to go through and do this entire tray. And like I said, the worm casting extract teas is the same one we've always done. We use the paint strainer bag. Take a few tablespoons of good worm castings, and then we just run a jet of water over these things to make a nice brown tea, and we'll use that to puddle these guys in, and that's basically how that is going to go. We did a thing a while back about starting our sweet potato slips, and we are now at a point where we're about 5 weeks after we started the process, and we're having starts that are getting close to the point where we can break these guys off. And what we're going to do is start rooting these guys in water, and they'll root really fast. And what I'm going to look for, these are all pretty new, so I'm not going to take too much off of this, but like here's some first ones that we can start with. These guys are already like about 2 or 3 inches tall, and we can take a few of these guys. And we're just going to start breaking these guys off. We'll put them in a little jar of water. Take them inside for a few days, and usually within, as long as we keep the water clean, usually within about, I'll set that over here, about 7 days, they're going to have roots, and then at that point, we can actually pot these guys up in like a 4-inch pot. Now, if you can't break them off, what you can do is you can use either snippers. I'll just use snippers instead of a knife. I've got these needle nose snippers. And I don't know if you can get in there and see that, Denise, but what you can kind of see is there's already a start of roots. Let me break one off or snip it off here so you can see it. I'm going to snip it off flush with the bud so that take these lower leaves off. Got a nice white area right here. And this is going to make a nice start. So we'll just put this in the water. I know it's going to seem, we got a little bit too big of a jar here. I may switch them off to a smaller jar. But this is basically it. This is the process. And like I said, in about 7 days, you're going to start seeing little rootlets starting in here. And that's when we can go ahead and bump these guys up into like a 4-inch pot. And these guys also, too, will be set out right around Memorial Day weekend because they need warm soil, too. Now this variety right here that we're doing the snips on, the first ones are, now here's a great example. You can already see this guy's already got a root right there. So this one's going to root really well. I'm going to take off anything that's around a bud, around that stem. Take off these lower leaves. So that's it. You can see the little root on there. Yep. That guy's going to germinate really well. So that's kind of the job today, even though it's kind of an overcast, rainy day. Get all our tomatoes bumped up. Start our first cuttings. We got 3 trays of these guys. Start our first cuttings on sweet potatoes. And the peppers are beginning to germinate, so they're a little bit behind the tomatoes. They took a little bit longer.
They seem slow.
They're always slower. I went back and looked at it. I thought they were all kind of like in the same 7 to 10 day zone. Turns out peppers are more of a 10 to 20 day thing.
We should have started them the week before.
Yeah, but they'll still do okay because based on what we did last year, they'll germinate and grow. They'll catch up pretty fast. But it's already starting to look like we're getting pretty good germination on these guys. I don't know if you can see any in here, but like this one was our classic bell pepper has already started coming up. We've got some of the goddess that's coming up. And some of the hot guys are starting, like Red Flame and Charger. So we got a lot of them that are just getting started. And we'll do the same thing with these guys. Once they get up and put up their first set of true leaves, we'll bump them up into a 6-pack, and then probably do that till they put on a good set of leaves, get a little more height to them, and get them into a larger pot before transplant. Now, some people would say, why would you go through all that effort? Why don't you just germinate them, stick them in a good-sized pot, and just let it go? What we have found, and this is just personal experience and just a personal preference thing, we've just found that it seems like the plants move along faster when they have a little bit of root in a smaller pot to a larger pot than taking something small and putting it in a much larger pot. So it's kind of like I don't know if it's a natural thing, but it just seems like they thrive a little better, and we end up in the end with a better plant. And maybe part of it is because as we move into transplant these guys into the deeper pot, we're going to have some stem that we're going to bury down into the pot itself. As you remember, this has got some depth to it, so they'll be buried maybe another inch or two, so they'll actually have more roots develop than if they were just, transplanted directly like this. So that's one of the theories behind it, and it seems to work pretty well for tomatoes and peppers when we do it that way. So I got a busy afternoon. What do you got?
Well, there's a million things in here that have to be bumped up.
Yep, we got a lot of flowers. Denise worked yesterday on pansies and alyssums, and looks like you got some petunias over there on the far side.
Yeah, I'm growing our for pots all around the farm, just bedding plants that I don't want to go and buy. I can just grow myself, and that's that group. I still have all our cutting flowers, still new next waves to plant or to seed, but we also have stuff to bump up. Yeah, we got stuff down the propagation house that's going to be planted this week. We already put our first sunflowers in yesterday, and we got stock to plant and yarrow and a whole bunch of great things down there. So we're going to be busy. Just waiting for the weather to kind of cooperate.
A little bit, yeah, kind of like, not hail on it or something, but...
Or for me, just to get a break from the allergies.
Yeah, it is. Springtime is a fun time. We get allergies as well as all the great things that we can start to, show the promise of the season here. So, I want to thank you all for joining us today. And as always, stay safe out there, and we'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.